This person is proposing that abortion bans are protected under the 14th Amendment because it's actually the fetus who is protected by the Equal Protection Clause, not the person carrying the fetus. Conveniently, this is exactly the same argument made by Texas and Roe v. Wade, so this ground is well trodden. As always, videos like this are not meant to argue with the person who made the comment. I've already done enough of that in the thread to know that they deserve what's about to happen, but to equip you with the necessary context should you come upon the same argument in your own life. After all, they all repeat the same arguments. In Roe, Texas argued that, quote, a fetus is a person within the language and meaning of the 14th Amendment, end quote, making this a fundamental question of what a person under constitutional law is. In the majority opinion, Justice Harry Blackmun acknowledges that there exists no case law that supports this definition of person. He also acknowledges that the Constitution doesn't establish the definition of person. He also points out that in the only instance in the 14th Amendment where a person is described, it is described as someone, quote, born or naturalized in the United States, end quote, which would suggest that personhood, as far as the Constitution is concerned, isn't established until birth. He also acknowledges that fetuses lacking personhood under the 14th Amendment is inferred by myriad other case law, including McGarvey v. McGee Women's Hospital, Byrne v. New York City Health and Hospital Corps, and United States v. Vuitch, to name a few, as all those decisions would be voided were fetuses to have an equal protection claim. However, Justice Blackmun ultimately decides that the question is moot because, quote, in view of all this, we do not agree that, by adopting one theory of life, Texas may override the rights of the pregnant women that are at stake, end quote. In other words, there are competing ideas about whether a fetus is a person under the Constitution, but the courts can't unilaterally use one to subjugate the rights of someone whose personhood is unambiguous, and the rights of the fetus would not override the rights of the pregnant woman even if its rights were established. It's worth noting that none of those claims were challenged in the recent Dobbs decision that overturned Roe. As this person goes on to do, conservatives will often attempt to fallaciously undermine Blackmun's argument by pointing to examples of the lack of legal personhood being used to uphold slavery. Beyond the obvious, abhorrent, contemptuous callousness of this comparison, it's also a false equivalence. In Dred Scott v. Stanford, it was decided that an enslaved person lacked legal personhood because any such claim is superseded by a slaver's right to their property. Women are making no such claim of property over a fetus. Instead, the claim is that a woman has autonomy over her body, of which an embryo and then a fetus is a part. And let me be clear, this attempt at appropriating the subjugation of enslaved people to justify the further subjugation of women is disgusting, and you should be ashamed of yourself for invoking it. The Supreme Court declined to consider the question of personhood in the recent Dobbs decision, and they further declined to hear an appeal of a Rhode Island Supreme Court decision of a case meant to test the question of whether fetuses have constitutional personhood. As of right now, the Supreme Court has shown little to no interest in relitigating this idea, and why would they? Ultimately, this claim of fetal personhood from the standpoint of the United States Constitution is simply unworkable. None of the people arguing that a fetus has personhood is arguing that someone conceived in the US but born in China should have US citizenship. None of those people are arguing that you should get a social security number at conception. None are arguing that child support is owed at conception or that a life insurance policy can be taken out on an embryo at conception, because embryos, fetuses, and people are different. There's no way to establish personhood for a fetus in a way that doesn't subjugate the pregnant person, and it defies reason to suggest that becoming pregnant is akin to consenting to that subjugation, since there's no way to completely eliminate the possibility of becoming pregnant while also pursuing life, liberty, and happiness in any form resembling equality. Furthermore, if the court were to establish such personhood, it would risk the right to all sorts of other reproductive health care, including contraception and in vitro fertilization, not to mention the ways in which claims could be made to control all aspects of a pregnant person's life. Does the state then get to decide what diet a pregnant person can partake in without it constituting assault on the fetus? Not only does it simply not make sense, it's impractical and entirely incompatible with individual liberty. Finally, to the person whose comment I'm responding to, I want to make it unambiguously clear that your views as articulated in that thread are awful. I don't want the civility offered in this video to cause any confusion about how truly reprehensible and utterly lacking in civility I find your belief system to be. You're claiming the right to decide when a woman's body is no longer hers. You don't have that right. You don't deserve that right. This goes well beyond how righteous you and your book club have convinced yourselves you are. If you're personally philosophically opposed to abortion, fine, don't have one. But in the real world, these laws are causing injury and death to women. The dominion you're claiming over women's body is representative of a patriarchal worldview that belongs in a dumpster. If the American experiment is ever to be truly successful, it will be in part because the misogyny to which you subscribe has lost all power and standing in society. In Richland, Washington, less than 200 miles from where I live, people just successfully detected gravitational waves for the first time in human history, fundamentally changing how humans explore our universe forever. Meanwhile, you're still arguing that women shouldn't be able to make their own decisions about their own lives and bodies. I understand people feel the need to cling to dying ideas in desperate attempts to stave off the existential terror that is social irrelevance, but that's your problem. Catch up or get left behind.